have 3 layers flay. So for my 3 layers flay, I'm going to have one at 1 inch above the, I'm going to sew one at 1 inch above my bicep. So my bicep here is 8 inches, so it means I'm going to sew the first flay at 7 inches. Then the second flay, I'm going to sew it at, that is the one that will overlay the, we have 3 flays. One will be shorter and the other one will be longer. So for the first one that will be shorter, I will have it laid at 1 inch above the full length line, and then the other one will just come at the same line. Okay, so I'm going to sew the both at the same line, but the length of the flays are going to be different. So I'm sewing 1 flay here and 2 flays here. So I'll be taking what I have here as the measurement of my circumference. So here I have 7.5. So if I open it up, that is times 2, I will have 15. So for the first flay now, for my first flay, I have 15 inches. Okay, that is the circumference. And the length of the flay is 6 inches. Okay, so and it's going to be a 360 degrees flay cutting. So for 360 degrees flay, the calculation for the radius is equal to circumference over 6.28. So my circumference here I'm working with is 15 divided by 6.28. I'm going to calculate it right now for my radius. That is for the first flay. Okay, so the length is 6 inches. So when I'll be cutting this radius, I'll use length 6 inches. Then the second and the third flay, which is going to be on this line, the second and the third one will be on this line. So I will measure what I have on this line. I have 7 inches. Okay, so 7 times 2 will give me 14. So the radius I'll be working with is 14 over 6.28 for the 2 of them. So I'm going to cut the length, one at 8 inches and one at 6 inches. So I'm going to cut at 8 inches. After cutting the 8 inches, then I'll cut that of the 6 inches. So I'm going to do the calculation now, and we'll proceed to the cutting of the circle flays. So I'm going to use my pepper to cut. Once I'm done cutting, I'll be placing what I cut on my fabric and then cut and add my seam allowances. So now I want to cut my flay, and to cut the flay I've calculated the radius of 15 divided by 6.28, and I have 2.3, and 14 divided by 6.28 is 2.2. So the difference is not much. So I'll be using only 1 pepper to cut my 3 flays, and you will see how I'm going to do that. So for your 360 degrees flay, this is what you do. If this is your fabric you are using, this is my fabric. I'm going to fold my fabric right now. I'm going to fold it again for my 360 like this. So at this point I'm going to measure my circumference and the length. So the first circumference, in fact the radius, I'm using 2.3. okay, because the difference is not much. I will be using 2.3. So 2.3, I'll approximate it to 2.25. okay, I'll approximate it to 2.25. 2.25. So this is my circle, which I'm going to sew into that particular sleeve right now. Okay, so now I've calculated the radius. Like I said, this radius is going to serve for all the radius for the 3 flays. Okay, so I use 2.25 for the radius here. Now I'm going to take the measurement of the first flay. The first flay is going to be at 6 inches. So at 6 inches, I'll make a mark. I'll make a mark. So this is what I have for the first flay. Then for the second flay, I want to have it same as 6 inches. So I'll use this flay for 1 and 2. Okay, flay 1 and 2. I'll use this particular pattern. And the third flay, which is the one that will be below. Okay, let me do 8.5. Okay, so we'll have enough difference. So what I have here is at that length is short, but I'm going to add it up by the time I start to cut. So this is it. So if I'm cutting, I'll add the rest of the ½ inch. I'll add it up there. So the third flay, I'll cut from here to here as my third flay. So now I'm going to cut only the third flay. The first flay I'm going to cut is the third flay. Once I'm done cutting the third flay, I'll trim it out at this point for the first and second flay. So I'm going to cut my radius right now. Okay, I'm going to cut off. This is what I want to do. Since I'm using this to place on my pattern, I'm not going to cut this yet. I'll open it up and cut out my flay. Okay, then once I cut out each flay, then I'm going to cut the radius on the fabric for ease of cutting. So I will spread it out now, and I'm going to hairstay my fabric. So let me quickly hairstay the fabric I'll be using for the first, second flay, and then I'll be back. Alright, so now I'm done cutting out the third flay. Okay, so this is the line for the first and the second flay. So I did not add any seam allowance because I don't have enough fabric, okay, to do this. So I'll just sew at the tip. I'll reduce my seam allowance from 0.5 to 0.2 or less. Okay, so I'm taking off my first pattern and I'll fold it back so I'll be able to cut it for the second pattern. So the way it is right here, I'm not going to scatter my flay. I cut 4 pieces here. I have lining for the both sleeves and the fabric for the both sleeves. Okay, so I'll just put them together so I'll be able to cut out my radius. So I'm going to fold it the way we cut our flay, as you can see. Then I'm going to secure with my pins if possible, because the fabric is actually thick. So at this point, I'm going to measure my radius. So the radius we are working with is 0.25. So I'll just mark out 0.25, then add my seam allowance. This is 0.25, 0.25, 0.25. So from that 0.25 marking, I'll add 0.5. Okay, so this is my mark of 0.5. So that is where I'm going to sew now, cut now. So if you look well, you can see I've added my seam allowance. So I just cut this radius. So the fabric is actually thick, so I just cut it bit by bit. So I've cut out my radius now. So the next thing I'm going to do is to face fabric and lining, fabric and lining, face to face. So the way it is now, I'm going to separate them because I'm going to my machine to sew around my flay and prepare the flay. So I'm going to separate it very carefully, very, very carefully. So this is the fabric, and I'll lay lining on top of it. Lining is going to face on top. I'll pick up this one and face it this other way. Okay, so I just pin them around and go to my machine and sew. So I'm going to sew this on my machine, and I will turn it top stitch. So I'm going to use my hemming gum to sew the edges. That is, if you actually want to have your flay smooth, you place your hemming gum on top and sew. So I will do that quickly, and then we'll proceed to the cutting of the second flay. So I'm done sewing now my flay with my hemming gum. So you can see the hemming gum on the flay, and I stitched as I have my pins on. You can see how I pinned, okay, and I was able to run my stitches on top of my pin. So I'm taking off the pins, and I'm going to clean up the edges right now. So I take off my pins, and I'll just clean up the edges, okay? I'm cleaning up the edges so it will be smooth to turn. I am not going to top stitch because I have my hemming gum. I'm good to go. So once I turn it around, the hemming gum gives me a sharp or clean edge, okay, which your top stitching will also give you, and this will even give you better, because once you turn it and give it a good press, it sticks on the other side of the fabric and it lays nice and smooth. So what I'm doing here is cleaning up the edges of this flay, so the turning of the fabric will be easy for me. So now I'll just go into the radius and turn. Okay, so I'll repeat this for the other part of the sleeve, and I'll go over to my ironing table and give this a good press. So I'm going to press it down very nicely, and then we'll proceed to the cutting of the second flay. So for the second flay, this is it. So all I'm going to do now is to cut the second flay right here. Okay, the first and second flay, I'm going to use my lace fabric for them as it is on the thumbnail. So I take away this. This is what I'm going to use now to cut my flay. So once I'm done cutting, I also cut my radius like I did in the third flay.